On January 3, 2026, as most of the world was still shaking off the New Year's celebrations, United States Special Forces descended on Caracas, Venezuela. Their target was President Nicolás Maduro. In a swift pre-dawn raid codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, American soldiers captured the Venezuelan leader. Just weeks later, on February 28th, a second, even larger operation unfolded. In coordination with Israel, the U.S. launched a massive series of air and missile strikes against Iran codenamed Operation Epic Fury. These two dramatic events, occurring in the early months of 2026, signaled a sharp and decisive turn in American foreign policy under the second Trump administration, a policy now heavily shaped by one of its most influential figures, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The foreign policy taking shape in 2026 is deeply imprinted with the views of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has articulated what some are calling the Trump-Vance-Rubio doctrine. This doctrine represents a significant evolution in Republican foreign policy thinking, blending core tenets of nationalism with a neoconservative willingness to project power. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Rubio dismissed what he termed the dangerous delusion that free trade international rules alone could ensure global peace and freedom. Instead, he argued for a world order based on national sovereignty and a clear-eyed assessment of threats, where powerful nations must act decisively to protect their interests and their borders. A central pillar of this new doctrine is the emphasis on national sovereignty. On the morning of February 28, 2026, the long-simmering conflict between the West and Iran escalated into open warfare. The United States, in a coordinated action with Israel, launched a massive series of attacks against strategic targets across Iran. The American component of the mission, codenamed Operation Epic Fury, was designed to cripple the Iranian regime's military and leadership infrastructure. The strikes were sudden, widespread, and devastating, involving air power and missile technology. They targeted key government compounds, military bases, nuclear facilities. The explicit goal was not merely to send a message, but to effect a fundamental change in the country's leadership and capabilities. Section 4. Justifications and consequences of the Iran conflict. The Trump administration offered several justifications for launching Operation Epic Fury, painting the strikes as a necessary act of self-defense. Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained that the administration had intelligence indicating that an Israeli action against Iran was imminent. He argued that this Israeli strike would precipitate an attack against American forces by the Iranian regime. Therefore, the United States had to act preemptively to protect its own personnel in the region. "We knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties," Rubio stated, framing the operation as a defensive measure designed to save American lives by striking first. However, other officials within the administration provided a different rationale, suggesting that President Trump's motivations were broader. According to these sources, Trump had grown convinced that Iran was negotiating its nuclear program in bad faith and was covertly advancing its weapons capabilities. The president reportedly felt that diplomacy had failed and that the only remaining option was to physically destroy Iran's offensive military infrastructure and its capacity to build a nuclear weapon. Section 5. Operation Absolute Resolve. The capture of Nicolás Maduro. Months before the dramatic strikes on Iran, the Trump administration undertook another bold military action, this time much closer to home. In the early hours of January 3, 2026, the United States launched Operation Absolute Resolve, a surgical military strike in the heart of Venezuela. The mission's objective was the capture of President Nicolás Maduro. The operation began around 2 a.m. local time, with explosions reported across northern Venezuela, as U.S. forces bombed infrastructure to disable the country's air defense systems. Simultaneously, an elite apprehension force descended upon Maduro's compound in the capital city of Caracas, overwhelming his security detail. Section 6. America First meets neoconservatism, a tense alliance. The foreign policy of the second Trump administration, as demonstrated in 2026, is built upon a complex and sometimes uneasy marriage of two powerful ideologies: America First nationalism, neoconservatism. The America First philosophy, which animated Trump's initial rise to power, prioritizes domestic interests, secure borders, and a deep skepticism of foreign entanglements and endless wars. It champions a transactional approach to international relations, where alliances are judged by their direct benefit to the United States. By the end of Trump's first term, this vision had not yet coalesced into a clear doctrine, leaving many to wonder about its practical application. Under the influence of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, this nationalist impulse has been fused with the interventionist ethos of neoconservatism. Section 7. A World on Edge. The unwritten future of American power, the foreign policy of 2026, marked by dramatic military operations in Venezuela, dramatic military operations in Iran, has ushered in a new era of American assertiveness and global uncertainty. The Trump administration, guided by the strategic vision of Secretary Marco Rubio, has demonstrated a clear willingness to use unilateral force to achieve its objectives. This approach is a potent blend of America First nationalism and neoconservative interventionism. It has produced immediate, tangible results: the capture of one head of state and the elimination of another regime's leadership. Supporters champion these actions as necessary steps to restore American strength and to deter adversaries who have tested U.S. resolve for years. But this bold strategy carries profound and unpredictable risks.